The iron punched through bronze and linen. Rain hammered the cold mud. On the banks of the Silurus River, 71 BC, the rebellion was broken. The man they called Spartacus died, but his real death, the one too terrifying for the screen, was not this battlefield end. This was just the killing. The unmaking was yet to come. The Roman state needed more than his body. It needed to swallow his name. Why did this one man threaten the foundations of the Republic? And what warning, made of wood and iron, was left standing against the winter sky? An army of the dead was about to be raised. If you enjoy these dark histories, leave a like and subscribe and comment below where you're listening from. And now, back to the story. The sound of battle faded. It was replaced by the cold, methodical sound of Roman logistics. On the banks of the Silurus River, 71 BC, rain washed the blood from iron. The legionaries, acting without anger, without haste, sorted the living from the dead. They were looking for one body, the body of Spartacus. It was not found. For the victor, Marcus Licinius Crassus, this was not a military problem, but an administrative one. A rebellion must have a head that can be mounted on a spear, a head that can be entered into the ledger as destroyed. Without that head, the war was not officially over. Instead of one body, Crassus took 6,000. 6,000 survivors, pulled from the mud and the reeds. This was the shift from catastrophe to control. They were disarmed, their armor stripped away, their wrists bound with rough rope. In that moment, they ceased to be an army. They ceased to be slaves. They became res, a thing, state property. Their personal names were erased. Their new collective name was 6,000. They were marched onto the stones, onto the great Appian Way. This was not a march to a dungeon. The road was the dungeon. 102 miles of cold, wet stone leading from Rome to Capua. They were being marched back to the beginning, to the very gladiator school where it all began. The symbolism was precise and merciless. They walked barefoot. The stones cut their feet. The rain turned to ice pellets. The guards did not hurry them. The legionaries simply walked alongside, their armor jingling in rhythm, their faces hidden behind the cheek plates of their helmets. They were functionaries, carrying out a sentence. Travelers and merchants on the road parted silently, staring at the column of ghosts. This was control through humiliation, through the complete stripping of human status. A rumor passed through the captives, a whisper that Pompey, returning victorious from Spain, might intervene, that he would offer terms, a milder exile, or sail to the mines. It was a faint hope, a mercy offered by the silence. But this mercy had a hidden price. The price was hope itself. What does the state build for men it has already defeated? Carts appeared on the side of the road. They carried no food, no water. They were loaded to the top with freshly cut timbers, smelling of pine resin. Other carts carried iron spikes, hammers, and coils of rope. Special teams of legionaries, not combat troops, but engineers, began their work. They measured distances. They dug holes. The sound of saws and hammer blows echoed across the wet valley. The hope for Pompey evaporated like breath in the frost. The prisoners watched. No screams, no struggle, no pleading. They had fought Rome for 2 years. They knew its methods. Now that everything was lost, freedom, the war, their leader, they had only one thing left to control. They could not choose life, but they could choose how they met what was being built for them. A quiet, stubborn resistance was born in the column. It was a decision not to give Crassus what he wanted most, the spectacle of their fear. They would be silent. This silence was their final armor. The wood and iron were being unloaded with methodical cruelty. The first timber frame was dropped into its stone-braced hole. It stood black against the gray sky. There was no trial by a magistrate, no Senate decree read aloud. The Via Appia itself was the courtroom, and Marcus Licinius Crassus, miles away, was the judge. The execution of the sentence was merely administration. The condition was delivered not by a herald, but by a pragmatic centurion, his armor stained with mud, a wax tablet in his hand. He moved down the line of bound captives, his voice flat, repeating the same offer. This was not about passion, it was a transaction. It was not mercy, it was an invoice. The location of his treasury, the names of the senators who supplied him, the location of his wife or children. speak. Your cooperation will be noted. You will be granted the gladius. The offer hung in the cold air, a quick death by the sword. Beheaded, not hung up to die. A soldier's end, not a slave's. Refuse, the centurion continued, his thumb gesturing to the raw pine frame, and you take the servile supplicium, the slave's punishment. The centurion stopped. He pointed at a tall, scarred Thracian, a man who had been a gladiator in the same ludus as Spartacus. You speak. The captive looked past the centurion, up the road toward Rome. He stared at the empty timber frame waiting for him. He turned his gaze back to the Roman. I have nothing to say. The centurion made a mark on his tablet. Next. This was the escalation. It began with the soft pressure of an offered bargain, a chance to betray a dead man for a slightly less agonizing death. But the offer was hollow. Crassus didn't need information. He needed a spectacle. He needed to break their loyalty, to prove that their brotherhood was meaningless before the power of the state. When the first dozen men refused, the soft pressure vanished. The second phase began: deprivation. The men were separated into groups. They were denied water. They were forced to watch as the soldiers, methodical as stonemasons, began their work. The sound of the first hammer striking the iron spike, a sound sharp and wet that cut through the wind. The rasp of rope as the patibulum, the crossbeam, was hauled up, the first condemned man already bound or nailed to it. The thud as the main post was settled into the earth. The man was raised. The line of captives did not falter. Their discipline, forged in 2 years of impossible war, became their armor. They had followed Spartacus from the kitchen of a gladiator's school to the fields of Mutina, where they had defeated governors and consuls. They had been trained to endure pain, to ignore fear, to obey. Now, that very discipline was inverted. What was meant to make them better soldiers for Spartacus now made them better martyrs against Crassus. How long can a man hold his silence against iron? The core why was finally resolved. This was never about justice. It was about terror. Spartacus had challenged the single, terrifying idea that held the Republic together, that a slave is not a man. He had taken rests, things, and proven they could think, bleed, and conquer as Romans. Crassus, in his cold fury, had to invert the miracle. He had to take these 6,000 men and turn them back into things. He had to prove that this rebellion was not a war, but a contamination, and that this was the cure. This was the price of Spartacus's escape. Because Crassus did not have the one body he craved, he would take 6,000 in its place. He would make every man become Spartacus. He would demonstrate, with the cold math of logistics, that the individual is nothing. The state is all. The refusal was absolute. No one spoke. The deprivation became silence. The legionaries hammered and the captives watched, their silence a mirror to the Romans' grim efficiency. They were marched forward, mile by mile. At even intervals, a new cross was raised. The Via Appia was 132 miles long. The math was simple: 6,000 men. One cross every 116 feet. A forest of death, planted with agricultural precision, stretching from Capua, where the dream began, back toward the gates of Rome, where it would end. The road, built to carry legions and commerce, was now a monument to erasure. The greatest road in the world became the longest grave. The winter of 71 BC was cold. The rain fell, then the sleet. The bodies were left until the birds and the weather scoured them clean. For months, the Via Appia was a 132-mile artery of terror. Finally, when the political point had been made, the legionary cleanup crews were dispatched. This was not a burial, it was sanitation. The rotting timbers were pulled down. The iron spikes were salvaged, counted, and returned to the quartermaster's stores. The post holes were filled with gravel and packed earth. The stones of the Via Appia were scrubbed with sand and vinegar. The grain carts and cohorts began to move again. The spectacle was over, but the road was changed. The hidden place was not a cave or a vault. It was the road itself. The motif of stone and iron had been permanently altered. The stones, now clean, held a memory. In the generations that followed, travelers between Capua and Rome reported a presence on that 132-mile stretch. It was a coldness that did not depend on the season, a heavy silence that seemed to swallow the sound of wagon wheels and marching feet. This became the wordless rite of memory. No one built a monument. The state would not have allowed it. No one dared stop to pray. Instead, a new unspoken custom emerged. Merchants hurried their mules, refusing to stop for the night on that section of the road. Legionaries kept their formations tight, their eyes forward, marching faster than usual. Women covered their faces as they passed. This shared, unspoken dread was the only memorial the 6,000 would ever receive. The stones remembered what the state demanded its citizens forget. But where is the proof? What hidden sign was left? The truth was not hidden in a lost treasury or a secret pact. The truth was hidden in plain sight, in the administrative ledgers of the Republic, in the archives of the victors. What the victors write is not always the truth. In this case, it was. We have no letters from the captives. We have no carvings from the ludus. The rebels left no written records of their own. The only evidence we have comes from the men who chronicled the war, men writing for a Roman audience. The historian Appian, writing in the 2nd century AD, over 150 years after the fact, did not flinch from the details. His account, based on sources now lost to dust, is our cautious evidence. He confirms the battle, the 6,000 survivors, and the final order from Marcus Licinius Crassus. He states, with the flat finality of a magistrate, that Crassus crucified them all along the road from Capua to Rome. This is the hidden truth. This is the death too terrifying for the screen. The movies need a hero, a final duel, a single man to mourn. The reality was an act of brutal mathematics. Crassus, denied the single body of Spartacus, decided to make 6,000 copies. He did not kill Spartacus, he diluted him, he multiplied him. He took the man, the symbol, and turned him into a statistic. He took the name that had shaken the Republic and hammered it into 6,000 anonymous pieces of flesh, spaced 116 feet apart. The true horror wasn't the nail, it was the ledger. It was the census. It was the cold, efficient power of the state, using its endless supply of wood, iron, and stone to prove that a man is nothing but a thing to be broken and counted. This was annihilation by logistics. The road was built to last forever. They made it a permanent scar. Act 6, Echo, Erasure. In Rome, the Senate debated profits and borders. Marcus Licinius Crassus was granted an ovatio, a lesser victory procession, not a full triumph. It was, after all, only a slave revolt. The name Spartacus became a contamination, a vox clandestina, spoken in whispers, then not at all. This was the official erasure. This was the withholding of ink. In the administrative ledgers of Capua, the ludi balanced their books. 6,000 entries once marked as fugitives were now simply blank. The quills were set down. There was no one left to call by name, so no names were recorded. This is the final victory of the bureaucratic state, not just to kill, but to make it as if you had never been born. The war was over. The paperwork was complete. The state had erased the names from parchment, but it could not erase the memory from the stones. The only witnesses were the stones of the Via Appia, and the distant cold accounts of historians like Appian and Plutarch, writing decades or centuries later. They are not testimony. They are echoes. They are the memory of the road itself, a 132-mile scar on the landscape of the Republic that refused to fade. They speak not of a single man, but of a number, 6,000. They speak of the sound of the wind moving through the pine frames, a sound that locals claimed lasted long after the bodies and the wood were gone. We began on the banks of the Silurus River. The iron punched through bronze and linen. Rain hammered the cold mud. We thought that was the end. But that was a warrior's death. It was quick. It was clean. It was a death Spartacus, the gladiator, would have understood. The real Spartacus, the idea, died a different way. He died 6,000 times, once for every man raised on the road. He died in the silence of the captives who refused the sword. He died in the administrative marks on a centurion's wax tablet. The movies show us a hero dying for freedom. The state, in 71 BC, showed the world that freedom was irrelevant. The only thing that mattered was the count, the road, the iron, and the absolute silent obedience of the stone. Subscribe, hit the bell, and like. The stones remember what the ink was forbidden to write.